Hi, it's Phyllis. You're ready to begin whenever we're ready to begin, whenever you are.
Okay. All right.
Great, thank you.
I'm ready.
Okay.
Good morning to all. I'd like to call to order this special meeting of the Intergovernmental Committee for November 9th, 2020 at 10 a.m. And just as a reminder for those that are going to be on this call, if you could kindly keep your phones muted while you're not speaking, that will help. In terms of compliance, Phyllis, have we complied with the Freedom of Information Act?
Yes, we have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'd now like to have the roll call done. Phyllis?
Okay. David Ames,
Here.
Tom Lennox,
Here.
and Bill Harkins.
And here.
Thank you, Mr. Harkins.
We have a motion for we have the agenda before us. Is there a motion for the approval?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the minutes remain approved. We have citizen comments. Citizens that wish to address the Intergovernmental Committee by phone had to call in no later than 12 noon on Friday, November the 6th. I believe we will have citizens on this call today. Phyllis, do we have any public comments?
Mr. Chairman, public comments concerning today's agenda items have been were to be submitted electronically via the town's open town hall portal. Public comment period closed on Friday, November 6th at noon. At the conclusion, there were no comments provided to the committee.
Okay. Now, I see here we have 4 individuals, citizens in the community that would like to speak. The first individual is a lady by the name of Pamela Ovens. Pamela, you're on if you would like.
My name is Pamela Martin Ovens, and I've lived on Hilton Head Island for over 40 years. I'm speaking today in response to Bill Harkins' comments at the last town meeting, November 4th, 2020, when he said, "We need to always be prepared to have a good water supply for the town." In 2000, Fortune magazine said that water promises to be, to the 21st century, what oil was to the 20th century, the precious commodity that determines the wealth of nations. The World Health Organization predicts that 48 nations will face severe water shortages by 2025, with 2/3 of the world's population running short of fresh drinking water. As potable water becomes scarcer, the world can expect violent conflicts over water to become more commonplace. Making a bad situation even worse, we have a world of water privatization where huge predatory multinational corporations are gaining control over our once publicly owned water supplies. European corporations dominate this global water services market, with the largest being the French companies Suez and Vivendi Universal, who control over 70% of the existing world water market. The bottom line on privatization will be price hikes and water quality problems. Water privatization is moving at a rapid pace because they know that whoever controls water is going to be both very rich and very powerful. Drinking water is a finite source. No one should be able to remove potable water from any water body or by drilling wells anywhere in the state without a DHEC state permit. And that permit must include official approval by a local authority such as a PSD, municipality, or county. All well drillers must check the permits before drilling at the risk of losing their business license. For example, DHEC's allowing Google to take 1.5 million gallons of water a day from the aquifer to run cooling for their servers in Mount Pleasant. The Southern Environmental Law Center and the Coastal Conservation League asked the Board of South Carolina DHEC to reconsider the withdrawal permit. DHEC approved the permit anyway. All existing wells on Hilton Head Island should come under the jurisdiction of the PSDs, and they will decide which old wells should be capped. I recommend that this meeting today be the beginning of better protecting our most precious resource, water. The time to act is now. Thank you.
We appreciate your research, your comments, and your advice. The next speaker is Luana Graves Sellers, please.
Good morning. This is Luana Graves Sellers, and I really appreciate the committee for adding the Beaufort Housing Authority to your agenda. Hilton Head Island has been designated as the #1 island again. However, based on the living conditions that exist at Sandalwood, all of us as island residents should be ashamed. I have been into some of the apartments and saw for myself watermarks from leaks in the roof and active mold that has spread from the air vents. It is my understanding that the Sandalwood residents live in fear of reporting conditions and the threat of eviction as a result. This should not be able to continue. The mission statement of the Beaufort Housing Authority is to provide quality, affordable, low housing and moderate income families and individuals in a safe community environment and to assist those who serve to achieve self-sufficiency. This is not the case, and that is not what they are providing, and they need to be held accountable. No one from the authority should be allowed to continue to treat the residents of our island the way that they are. Questions about their funding should begin to be asked, and they should not be able to continue to provide substandard conditions, particularly and especially on Hilton Head. I thank you for your attention to this matter, and I hope that your intervention will be something that will assist the residents of Sandalwood. Thank you.
Thank you, Luana. And as you know, that will be the second item on today's agenda. So we encourage you to stay tuned in. Our next speaker is Tiffany Glover, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tiffany Glover, and I reside in Sandalwood Terrace Apartments, owned by the Beaufort Housing Authority, with my 9-year-old son, Quintez. As a tenant in this community, I'm very concerned that there are many unsafe living conditions on the property that need your prompt attention. Although Beaufort Housing Authority claims to provide safe, decent, and sanitary housing, we, the tenants, find it very hypocritical, as many of you have already read. From the mold, roach, and bedbug infestations, lack of proper fire safety equipment and emergency exiting measures, broken appliances, exposed electrical connections, lack of responses in respect for its tenants, and missed deadlines all show the lack of concern for its program participants. There are 181 deteriorating units in which many children are housed. We, the tenants, request to know the extent and gravity of the structure of what we consider to be our homes. Things such as possible lead and asbestos, documented mold and infestations are all serious health risks and violate federal laws. We, the tenants, also request a review of the funding that was provided to this property. Thank you.
And again, this item will be addressed as the second item on our agenda today. We have a gentleman by the name of Joseph Coe, please.
Mr. Chairman, it appears Mr. Coe is not on the line.
Okay, well, let the record show that we recognized Mr. Coe as a potential speaker, but for reasons unknown to us, he wasn't able to attend. Next item, unfinished business, we have none. Under new business, we have before us the approval request for the meeting dates for the coming year. Is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve the agenda as submitted.
I'll second.
The schedule, I'm sorry.
Yes, yeah, the schedule. So we have a motion to approve and a second to approve the schedule for the forthcoming year. All those in favor, please so signify by aye.
Aye.
The schedule is approved. I'd like to now move forward to our next item on the agenda, which will be focused on our PSDs in the community. We're pleased to share with the public that we have key leadership people that have graciously volunteered their time to enter this discussion with us today. We have Kelly Furta from the South End PSD. We have Pete Nardi from the Hilton Head PSD. We have Mr. Mike Allen from Broad Creek. And we also have Adam Phillips, who's a specialist on a technical level, I believe, at Broad Creek. So again, thank you all for taking time out of your busy days to join in this conversation. I thought I would share with you how this, the thought of this invitation came forward. Several years ago, when I was thinking of running for town council, I thought I would meet with some of the key leadership individuals and the key organizations in the community, and one of which was the PSD, which at that time was being led by Richard Sear, and now it's under the able direction of Pete Nardi. In that meeting years ago, I was presented with a consultant report that seemed to suggest that PSD had or was capable of having sufficient capacity to address the water and sewer treatment needs for the entire island, and also having the potential for considerable savings for the entire community. As we look now today, several years forward, whether that report has any relevance for the future, in my mind, remains unknown. Therefore, but what prompted the thought in my mind was that we have some very responsible people from PSD Broad Creek and PSD South Island a request for the town to consider conveying / selling some land. And with that request, and recognizing that we're on an island with a finite resource called land, I thought it would just be appropriate to re-educate myself and in our committee as to what the current situation is with our PSDs on the entire island. So with that in mind, and recognizing that we respect the leadership that you bring to a key infrastructure item in our community, and we're very grateful for your stewardship, I thought it would be good to have a conversation today that would share with us from your viewpoint an overview of each PSD, what operational issues you may be facing today, have faced in the past and overcame, or may be facing in the future. I'd like to also become aware of any cooperative or complementary efforts that you have underway between or among yourselves, and also what cooperative or complementary opportunities may lie before you in the future. We'd also like you to share with us from your perspective what the town is doing or could be doing to be more helpful to you. We'd like to have you share with us what your current interface with the town is, what the pluses and minuses of that may be, and how it might be improved if so warranted. And we would also like you to share with us that as you plan for the future of your resources individually or collectively, how do you integrate that planning process with us And the converse also applies. How do we as a town interface our planning with you? And lastly, the largest project facing our town, as we all know, is the 278 project. What does that pose for you in terms of issues? What opportunities may that pose for you in terms of introducing a new pipeline? What can we do to be helpful? How do we link you into the planning process so that we're moving together in a complementary direction? So those are preliminary thoughts that I have that I would like to discuss today. Before we turn it over to the PSD, we have two council people on the call, and I think others may have joined us. And I would like now to turn it to each person on the call. And if you have other ideas or suggestions you'd like to share with our colleagues at PSD, now please do. I'll begin with Mr. Lennox, please.
Bill, I reviewed the presentation online. I can't add anything more to your comments, but I'm anxious for the presentation.
Okay. David Ames, please.
Bill, nothing at this time. I'll be pleased if we can get through your agenda.
And Tammy Becker, another colleague, a member of Town Council, not a committee member.
At this time, I'm good. I'm just listening in at this moment. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. So I'm going to turn it over now to PSD leadership. This is a respectful collegial meeting. We want to learn from you. We hope you can learn from us, and we can see what opportunities are available to the future for us to all be more successful for the overall benefit of the island. So with that, leadership from PSD, I'm not sure what order you'd like to go in, but whoever is going to be the first designated speaker, please come forward.
Bill, thank you so much. I'm Pete Nardi. I'm the general manager of Hilton Head PSD. I will tee things up for us here today. And then with me, of course, as you mentioned at the top, is Mike Allen of Broad Creek PSD and Kelly Ferda of South Island PSD. We'll each go through a couple slides here as we roll through the presentation. So let me just start off to orient things. The map on your screen is showing you the service areas of the three PSDs. Hilton Head PSD actually serves unincorporated Beaufort County, the Jenkins Island area, Windmill Harbor, and then we stop right after Hilton Head Resort. So we're serving Hilton Head Plantation, Port Royal, Indigo Run, all of your Native Islander neighborhoods, Spanish Wells area, your North and Mid Island, a lot of your full-time residents' homes. Broad Creek PSD in the middle is serving the Shelter Cove, Palmetto Dunes area, Leamington, Chimney Cove, Yacht Cove. Everything south of Leamington, Shelter Cove is the South Island PSD service area. So there you're talking about your Pope Ave area, Sea Pines, Wexford, Shipyard, Long Cove, so much of your commercial areas here on the island. Oops, Adam, I'm not forwarding there. So what do the PSDs do? We all provide essentially the same 6 services. We are in the water production business. We produce tap water, drinking water, from groundwater sources here on the island. We treat water. We use reverse osmosis treatment to treat your drinking water. We use chloramine injection, variety of disinfection methods to make sure that the water is safe before it's being delivered to your homes and businesses. We then, of course, no point in producing and treating water if you're not going to give it to anybody. So we are water distribution utilities. That is all of your storage capacities, all of your mains, all of your pumps, your valves, your meters, all in the hands of the PSDs. It's the water distribution aspect of the system. We are all sanitary sewer service utilities, not treating stormwater, but we're treating the wastewater that is generated inside your homes and businesses. Extensive lift station infrastructure, sewer lift stations, extensive sewer mains, all throughout Hilton Head Island. So then we are all three wastewater treatment utilities. You take the sanitary sewer, bring it to our centralized wastewater treatment plants. We engage in very common wastewater treatment methods that you'd see throughout North America, but have a lot of state-of-the-art aspect of that too, just as we do on the drinking water treatment side. And then what's really cool about Hilton Head Island, when you're talking about water and wastewater, is that we are all three recycled water utilities. Unlike a lot of places in North America where you might treat your municipal wastewater and then put it back into a river or lake, some other kind of surface water body, here on Hilton Head, we are recycling our wastewater, our treated, highly treated wastewater. Goes either to interior wetlands for wetland nourishment programs to keep these habitats viable, our interior wetland habitats, or it is commoditized and sold to our golf courses and used as their irrigation water. It is a real pioneering kind of program that Hilton Head is a leader in, a national leader in. And it lessens the golf course's impact on our potable water supplies. Very, very critical component of what's done here on the island. I can tell you that in our industry, what we do here is the envy of many, many communities in North America. They wish they had the type of recycled water program that Hilton Head has had for decades and has pioneered. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Allen. He's going to tell you a bit about how the utilities work together.
Good morning, this is Mike Allen, Broad Creek General Manager. As Pete had mentioned, the Broad Creek services the middle of the island, but in servicing the middle of the island, Broad Creek also works with the other two PSDs, and some of the bullet points you see in front of you. Since my tenure, I've been here 5 years, but prior to me, the PSDs have been working together numerous years and coming up with mutual aid agreements, emergency preparedness as far as hurricane recovery or disaster preparedness. We also have a business continuity plan that we put together and revise and revisit usually every few years to make sure that we are still providing good business management for the water and wastewater. Asset management as well. Each PSD has asset management that we make sure that we are on top of any issues that may arise and try to get in front of. We have mutual water source and supply studies that have been done. Matter of fact, the three PSDs just jointly finished beginning of this year any connectivity studies or opportunities that may be able to take an advantage of between the three PSDs, both for water and wastewater. And then we have professional development and safety training that all three PSDs handle together and individually, making sure our employees are up to speed on all the latest and greatest information available to us. Our sources of water, as many of you may or may not know, we have the Upper Floridan that currently, or way back when, was the initial water supply for the island. As that continues to get pumped down, what the PSDs are experiencing is saltwater intrusion that is affecting the Upper Floridian, which is making wells unusable without additional treatment via RO, reverse osmosis. There's also the Middle Floridan aquifer. This aquifer is typically used for ASR or aquifer recovery and storage. This is what currently Hilton Head PSD and South Island PSD use to store water and pull out during high demand times. And then we have the Cretaceous aquifer. This is being used by South Island PSD. Currently, this is up to 4,000 feet deep and is pulling hot water out of the ground to be able to use as a drinking supply. We also have wholesale water supply coming from Beaufort Jasper Water and Service. They pipe over water to Hilton Head PSD and Broad Creek PSD as an alternate supply. These supplies are constantly being monitored and maintained and planned to move forward for other supplies, as Broad Creek has done, and South Island and Hilton Head PSD currently have supply plans going out up to 50 years. So we are all cognizant of any requirements that we have coming up and trying to be ahead of any demands that might be out there. With that, I will turn it over to Kelly Furta with South Island PSD.
Hi, this is Kelly Furta from South Island PSD. I'm the general manager. So we just wanted to review some of our future water challenges. As Mike already alluded to, we are continuing to lose more upper Floridan wells due to saltwater intrusion. And the saltwater intrusion issue has been affecting this whole local area since the mid-1970s. There's been a lot of studies about it, although we still do rely on our upper Floridan wells. And as the saltwater has encroached into that aquifer, we've all been forced to develop additional supplies of water. So some of the challenges moving forward will be to replace the rest of that supply eventually. I know you were talking about the new line that would come under Skull Creek and onto the island, but I also want you to be aware on the south end that we're going to need additional water mains going down 278 and Cordillo Parkway and down Greenwood. We will also be looking at another reverse osmosis water treatment plant, along with at least one more Cretaceous well and potentially some additional aquifer storage and recovery facilities. Another issue is, I know in some of the areas, like in Pete's area where there's still a lot of undeveloped land, is making sure that we work jointly with the town to make sure where these the new development will come into play, and how we make sure that we're meeting those increased demands in the certain geographic areas. It's one thing to develop the additional water supply, but as Pete said, you also have to get the water to where it needs to go. So those are some of the issues that we're all looking at currently. And I think, we've talked about this forever and do a lot of education about the ongoing need for water efficient behavior. So things like, putting in native vegetation that requires less water, having the rain sensors on the sprinklers. I know Sally Krebs has talked to this group quite a bit. We're always talking about water conservation. I think she has some really good ideas as to how she could augment maybe the town's website to help continue to educate people. And she has quite a history with this whole saltwater intrusion issue. So she may be a good person for us to partner with, as well as the town, to enhance some of that public education. And then we all thought about ways in which the town can help us. And I think for the most part, we would all say we have a very good ongoing relationship with town staff. One thing that we did think would be a good idea is if we could get one person as a liaison for utility infrastructure improvements. And I think it would be helpful to the town staff as well as to us, because as we've talked about, some of this technology that we're using on the island isn't used in conjunction the way we do anywhere else in the state and in very few places in the whole Southeast. So as our infrastructure and our technology becomes more and more sophisticated, it would be helpful to us if we had one person that could be our point of contact as we approach the town about permitting or acquisition of land or easements or any of those types of issues. And we already discussed a little bit about just considering water and sewer impacts due to growth and redevelopment. And when you talk about land, I know right now we're looking for some parcels of land in our area, and it's a real challenge at the south end because there is not a lot of property that's open or vacant. We have worked with the town staff. We're looking at a couple different parcels as we speak. But also be mindful, not only the land, but also easements. So when you're talking about running large distribution lines down 278, but it's not just 278, it's going to be in a lot of the larger thoroughfares throughout, I think, everyone's district. And then once again, I think, we would still ask that we could beef up the water conservation message a bit and make sure that, people are using their rain sensors. And it's interesting, yesterday I was out riding my bike and before it rained, and I went out later when it was pouring rain, and there's still people that have their sprinkler systems running. And that's a big pet peeve of mine. But anyways, and I think with that, we'll take any questions that you may have.
Okay. Thank you for that excellent overview. Let me open it up to our committee for questions or comments. Going left to right here on my screen. Tom Lennox, please.
Thank you, Bill. Great presentation, all. I'm going to print that presentation out and use that in the future. Bill, I do have two questions. Kelly, Mike, and Pete, what are you seeing the trends in usage over the past 10 or 15 years?
Honestly, we're not seeing the trends go down. And unfortunately, I think the vast majority of water is being used for irrigation still.
There are a number of vacant structures on the island, and if we go back 10 or 15 years ago when they were occupied, I would have guessed that that would have had an impact on the trend. But second question, we've been talking about saltwater intrusion for a long time. What sort of remedies or advancements are you seeing or are out there in the future to help with that?
Well, I would say the saltwater intrusion problem on Hilton Head Island is in the upper Floridan aquifer, which is a relatively shallow aquifer. Most of the wells that are drilled into it are about 80 to 100 feet deep. The only way to treat water cost effectively and remove sodium chloride is through reverse osmosis. However, these wells, if you think about the way that in which the island was developed, They're smaller wells and they're geographically spread out. So it wouldn't make sense economically or volume-wise to put membrane treatment at little tiny wells. That's why when you do membrane treatment, like at Pete's plant, he's got Middle Floridan water. We have Cretaceous, but you need flows of like 1,500 to 2,000 gallons a minute. That's a lot of water. Because when you go and build these big treatment facilities, it costs a lot of money. And even if you said, oh, well, couldn't we put one at this Upper Floridan well? You don't have room and it's not cost effective and you wouldn't get the quantity of water that you need.
So the quantity is a function of, well, I guess you wouldn't drill in the north end of the island, you would drill in the south end.
It's about using the sources, Tom, and what Kelly's alluding to is, the future in terms of Hilton Head's groundwater, the future is the membrane-based treatment of brackish groundwater, be it from the Middle Floridan, like we allude to, or in the deeper source, like the Cretaceous. The Upper Floridan is probably, this is the supply, like Kelly said, that where the saltwater intrusion threat is greatest. And the nature of that source is probably not going to be something that we'd continue to develop. We go to these more abundant, more stable sources. It's brackish already. We treat it with the membranes. And that type of treatment has only advanced and advanced and advanced in our industry. It's become more and more affordable. The abilities have become more widespread. That's why municipalities like us are using it now. Used to be just sort of a military thing or an industrial thing, but now you have it for widespread municipal use.
But you can access those two aquifers from any part of the island.
Right.
A southern part or northern part or the middle does not exclude one or the other.
Mike, that's exactly what I wanted to hear you say, and that's good news.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. David, please.
That's a lot of information to absorb and have any cogent comments or questions. It used to be perceived that the saltwater intrusion was moving from off-island to on-island because of savanna drawdown. Is that no longer the case, or is it the fact that we are now using the membrane treatment so that saltwater intrusion is less of a factor?
No, David, you're exactly right. The amount of water that is pumped in the Savannah general area, and we've done cooperative studies with some hydrogeologists here on the island, and we were fall under a capacity use program where we can only pump so much water out of the Upper Florida, and you may be familiar with that. I know you have quite a history. But Savannah really still, with the amount of water they pump, the studies that we have seen, they said even if we turned off all the Upper Floridan wells today, it would have no effect on the progression of saltwater, because the amount of influence that the Savannah area has over the supply on Hilton Head is tremendous.
Just for perspective there, David, Hilton Head is from that Upper Floridan source, that freshwater aquifer source that we've lost to the saltwater. Our cap is around 5 million gallons a day. That's the state rule put on the island. You have industries in Savannah that run just one process during their day is more than 5 million gallons out of that same aquifer. So the hydrogeology has been tipped, and we're on the shallow end.
Thank you. I appreciate your suggestions on how the town can be helpful. They seem logical to me, but the one that stands out the most for me is the relationship of the decisions that the town makes vis-a-vis its land use and zoning and the impacts that those decisions have on your distribution lines and your capacity expectations. I think that's something that we need to talk further about because we have market rate housing being built on the island. We have starter homes necessary for workers. And we have two significant policy decisions being discussed at this time, one having to do with the Gullah Geechee overlay and the other having to do with bonus densities for workforce housing. Those decisions could significantly impact primarily PSD1. And so I see the burden of asset management being heavily weighted in the direction of PSD1. So as we talk about these issues, that there is collaboration among the three, but the pressure is on one, how do we navigate that future?
You know, David, I think we're back to, that issue of making sure that there is some thought given when council is, considering things like density changes, and a little bit more of a check-in, if you will, with the PSD on some of those decisions. It's really no different than checking in on, okay, what's the impact on schools? What's the impact on roads? And, what we're asking is that water and sewer be a part of that. We don't see any kind of immediate crunch in terms of supply and the ability to handle what might come at us in our service area. We've recently done studies in collaboration with your town staff to look at the current zoning, what could be coming at us in the future, our build-out scenario, if you will, of potential units. But if and when those kinds of things change, that's when we need to sort of reconvene there a little bit and say, okay, are we still on track?
I'm just trying to shine a brighter light on the relationship of land use decisions and infrastructure demands. We wouldn't be having the same bridge discussion, corridor discussion today, or the issue of expanding roads, the challenges of potable water, and I'm not suggesting this should have happened, 20 years ago, we put a cap on the island population. I'm just really trying to emphasize that every time a application for increased density is made, it should be made in the context of the impact on water, sewer, drainage, roads, and bridges, and so on. Okay, having said that, I guess the asset management and coordination of the three public service districts really begins to beg, are we moving in the right direction from a global or island-wide standpoint? And I'm not begging for an answer at this point, but just this conversation suggests that. A couple of minor questions. How many wells did we have on the island 10 or 15 years ago, and how many of those have failed?
Our PSD has lost the use of, about 5 out of 11 in the past 20-some years.
Yes. Yeah.
That's upper Floridan water. Some of that isn't all related to saltwater intrusion either. It just can be related to other water quality impacts where the source wasn't considered acceptable by the utility.
What about South Island?
We currently have lost about 4 out of 15 wells. We have a couple more that are moving in that direction. And just so you all know too, I think we all do a very diligent job in monitoring our water supply, our upper Floridan wells. We do chloride conductivity readings every month. But when the salt water comes, sometimes it can be gradual and sometimes it can happen almost overnight. And that's why we've all been forced to looking, like we've just finished a water supply study to the year 2050. We're all looking long-term at our supplies.
Okay, and what about Broad Creek?
Broad Creek PSD, we have 3 wells and we haven't lost any of those to saltwater intrusion. But we are concerned because we've seen some saltwater intrusions pop up that prior studies didn't show would be affected through South Island's loss of wells. So we're just trying to plan and be prepared. As Kelly mentioned, some of these wells will turn salty within 30 days and you've lost a water supply. Trying to be able to provide water for your residents, you can't make that up in 30 days.
And how many golf courses on the island are within your respective PUDs or PSDs recycle water on golf courses?
Say that again.
David, we lost you there for a second. Can you repeat that?
Yes. How many golf courses on the island use recycled water?
All of them. I believe the only exception might be Spanish Wells Plantation has a 9-hole that I think they still use some shallow irrigation wells. But all the golf courses receive recycled water other than that.
Okay. Well, needless to say, this is a huge topic. I've got a little bit of background in it, so I'm going to hold off all my questions, but I think we're headed in the right direction to have this conversation.
Thank you, David. I see Tammy's on the screen. Tammy, would you like to join in?
Just for a moment, I know that this is y'all's committee, but I do want to say thank you. The presentation was amazing. And as someone without much background in this area, I'm going to use this opportunity as a starting point to educate myself and begin some additional research and ask if it's possible, if I can call on any one of you, or maybe all of you, to maybe fill in some gaps as I become more knowledgeable with that. And then I just wanted to tag on to Kelly. I have the same pet peeve with regard to irrigation and rainstorms. Other than that, much of the important discussion has started, and I look forward to continuing it in the future.
And I think we can, all 3 of us are more than happy to have any one of you reach out to us at any time with questions or concerns.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Pete, in an earlier conversation, you alluded to the potential value or need of expanding the major water line that is going to be in the 278 area. Could you expand a little more on that, please?
So just information-wise for council, when we talk about the wholesale water that comes onto the island, that's treated drinking water that Hilton Head and Broad Creek PSDs are purchasing on a wholesale basis from the larger utility on the mainland, Beaufort Jasper Water and Sewer. The 2 PSDs, Hilton Head and Broad Creek, jointly own a large-scale drinking water pipeline. That is, part of it is buried under the Intracoastal Waterway in the vicinity of the bridges. And then as you come on the island, it forms a large main backbone coming down into the center of the island, culminates at a ground storage tank we have at the corner of Matthews and Folly Field. The US 278 Bridges project, the DOT informs us that there's a very strong likelihood that we will be relocating our infrastructure in the vicinity of the corridor project as a result thereof. When we're looking at something like that, because that pipeline is such long-term infrastructure, we get in touch with our wholesale supplier and say, what do we think the capabilities are going to be in the future? Can we increase capacities in that pipeline? Can we do things like perhaps build some redundancy in that pipeline as well, just for any future disaster we might face? So we're in the throes of that preliminary planning, and really we're awaiting the DOT's design preference. That's going to tell us where we have to go. But in the meantime, we want to look at that opportunity of creating more capacity in that pipeline, because we're going to be living with it here on the island for the next half century or so once you relocate that kind of infrastructure. But I think it's critical for the town to bear that in mind as we all work through the planning of that public works project.
And from the leadership at the table there, is this if the expansion of that pipe is so warranted, maybe some even relocation, does this item fall into a joint planning effort on your collective part?
We are joint planning along with DOT to look at relocation of that line.
Okay. All right, thank you. I want to thank each of you for an excellent presentation. I view this today as an education for us at the 101 level. We'll be sharing your advice and comments with the town manager and with the mayor and our other colleagues at town council. I can assure you that we all on town council have a high regard for what you do, and the key, how your leadership is so key for a very vital infrastructure element in our community. So keep up the good work, and we'll be back later, I think, for more discussions. But we want to thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
Bill, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay. All right. Now we'll move on to our second item on the agenda. Can we continue?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, can we? I just had a technical question. May we continue? Our next item is a discussion with Angela Childers, the Executive Director of the Beaufort Housing Authority. Angela, are you on?
I am. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can. Well, thank you very much for coming on board. And again, when I had the opportunity of speaking with Angela, she was most gracious and most forthcoming, and very happy to sit down and talk with us. So, and I shared with her, this is not an inquisition, this is a learning process for all of us. And with that in mind, just by way of background, I'm going to set the stage for what prompted this meeting, and then some rhetorical questions that I have that may be added on to by other members of our committee. But again, thanks for being here. I think as many of us know, in a recent Island Packet article, a fairly lengthy article as I recall, many readers were left with questions and concerns about the living conditions in the Sandalwood neighborhood, to be direct. And many of us have heard questions which I'll share with you in no rank order, but questions such as, is this article or was this article truly an accurate portrayal of the existing situation? I don't know that, but that's a question. What is the role and responsibility of our town and its building department to serve in a helpful way here? What is the role of our fire and rescue department in terms of assuring fire safety in these residencies? Are inspections by appropriate bodies done on a scheduled basis upon request, or both? How does the Beaufort Housing Authority assure itself that the units are properly maintained and safe? What's the schedule of activity? What are the channels available for a resident to request help or assistance? What are the standards of performance that might be in place to critique the presence or absence of a good housing situation? What is the remedy when corrective action is either not done or not done in a timely manner? What is the chain of command assuring that corrective action is taking place? Who's in charge? I feel as a town that we have a responsibility to assure a safe environment. I'm sure the Beaufort Housing Authority does. How is that coordinated? How do you treat situations when there may be potential conflict? What are the communication channels among HUD, the Beaufort Housing Authority, the town of Hilton Head, again, our building department and fire and rescue? Another question, how could or should all of these entities, ourselves included, work better together? How has the COVID situation impacted your operation? What could the town do that maybe we're not doing to be more helpful? Does or do the required maintenance projects exceed your financial capability? Does the another question from an appearance standpoint, does the Sandalwood operation add to or detract from the town's brand? Looking forward, what could we do together to help with this very critical housing shortage that we have in the community? Are there things that you're aware of that other communities are doing that we're not doing that we could do better? Those are some top of the mind questions I have. I'll be glad to swing it to the committee members and set the stage for, again, a respectful conversation with Angela. I'll begin with Tom Lennox on the far left, please. Tom, you're muted.
Bill, I can't add anything to that long list of questions that you teed up for Angela. And Angela, I hope you brought a lunch.
Okay, let me just go quickly here then, not to rush anyone, but David Ames, please. David, we don't hear you.
Okay. Angela, how are you doing? Good to see you again.
Good to see you as well.
I think I have a simple question. What needs to be done to improve the Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you. Tammy, please.
So that was a very comprehensive list of questions, Bill. I do have some others, and I may have missed, and I apologize if I did. I'm interested in the organizational structure of the authority, board members, their appointments, terms, and how, if they're compensated, etc., but how that structure is set forward. Some of the funding streams that exist. I'm interested in the maintenance, work orders, inspections, those that are done on routine basis of interior and exterior of the building. I'm interested in the grievance procedures. I'm interested in knowing something more about the number of units, and I guess this may fall under somewhat of the organization, but the number of units, how many of the existing units are occupied, if there are statistics with regard to how many children under 18 are living in those units, how many senior and how many disabled individuals. I'm interested in how the utility structures work. I'm also interested in knowing more about additional resources that are provided. After reading a few of the documents, I see a lot of what is expected of the tenants, the residents, the humans who live in the building, but I don't see if there are any mechanisms or processes for assisting with additional resources, meaning things like workshops, assistance making connections with other departments and units that might be able to provide different types of assistance with development. So those are briefly some of my concerns. I would like to reserve the right, though, to follow up with additional questions as we become more educated. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. And again, welcome, Angela. We stand together with you on the same platform of public service, and we're interested in what you do, which is very important for the community. And I think what we outlined today in questions certainly could fill a day's workshop. So I think the wisdom of David Ames was demonstrated with that singular question. If you could begin with that, and again, this meeting cannot run all day, but subject to the outcome, it may be something the town manager and the mayor might consider for a workshop later. But again, welcome, Angela, and the microphone is yours. Is Angela,
Mr. Harkins?
Yes,
Hi, Mr.
yes.
Harkins. She is having network issues, it seems. So if we could just give her another moment to reconnect.
Okay, I hope we didn't scare her away. You have a lunch in? I was going to buy your lunch too.
Okay, I'm back. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I'm sorry about that. I think my computer overheats shortly after it's been on so long. I missed just the very last part.
Mr. Harkins, Angela's
Yes.
ready to start her presentation now.
Okay, Angela, welcome. The mic is yours. With our technical delay, I was hoping we didn't scare you off with all of our comments.
Actually, you did not, and I do apologize. That was, I think my laptop's not as new as it needs to be, and it occasionally just overheats and turns off. So if it happens again, I will certainly be right back. But Chairman Harkins, members of council, Mr. Mayor, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to be here today and to discuss the recent issues that we have at Sandalwood Terrace. I need to figure out, so I need to go back and share my screen. Give me 1 second. Let me find this.
Is Mark on this committee? No. There's 3.
Okay. I've prepared a little presentation, and if it's okay with you, what I'd like to do is tell you a little bit about affordable housing, what we do, tell you what's next with our plans, and certainly address the issues that have recently come up at Sandalwood Terrace. And then if I did not answer all your questions, because I know I will answer some of them in the presentation, I'd be happy to answer them at that point. So, Chairman Harkins, if that's okay with you, I'd like to begin.
Yes, please. The microphone is yours.
Thank you so much. So, what I thought we'd start with just some quick definitions. The first one is affordable housing. If a renter is paying more than 30% of their gross income toward rent, they're considered housing burdened, and that is not considered affordable housing. The area median income is determined by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development annually, and that is what we use as a standard definition of a median income or income guidelines. And you have the area median income, you have low income, you have very low income, and you have extremely low income, which is 30% of median or below. Just real quick, a few statistics. Today, there is a shortage of over 7 million affordable units in the United States, across the country, and there is not one county in the U.S. where a minimum wage worker earning $7.25 an hour, working 40 hours a week, can afford a 2-bedroom apartment. Because of decades of funding cuts and budget caps, today 3 out of 4 families eligible for housing assistance spend years on waiting lists before they are offered any form of assistance or help. The area median income for Beaufort County, just a few Beaufort County statistics. I think I missed a slide. Let me see if I can go back. Okay. The area median income for Beaufort County is $81,500 a year, and that's based on a family of 4. And I'm sure you've heard this many, many times. We are certainly one of the highest areas in the state of South Carolina, including, we're certainly compatible with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg metropolitan service area, and I know that you're saying that's Charlotte, that's North Carolina, but there is a part of that that's South Carolina, so it does count in our comparisons. Monthly rent, including utilities, affordable at 30% of that $81,500 would be $2,037 a month. Monthly rent, including utilities, affordable at 30% of 30%, that is the extremely low poverty level, is $654 per month. The fair market rent for a 3-bedroom apartment in Beaufort County is $1,564 a month. So again, extremely high, and certainly one of the highest in the states. The hourly wage necessary to afford a 3-bedroom apartment in Beaufort County at 30% gross income is $28.85. So where did this all start? Where did it come from? The Housing Act of 1937 was one of the first pieces of national housing legislation. in the United States. And it was the first federal legislation that allowed housing authorities to be formed and to begin. The premise is that good housing is a basic and humane, and it is necessary. There were two purposes for the 1937 Housing Act, and they were to provide low-cost housing and to stimulate the economy. They came with income restrictions, and we still have income restrictions today. They also came with very poor design, and that was just the way it was at the time. Now, we didn't build Sandalwood Terrace till the mid-'80s, but at that time, they still had poor design. For example, when we built Sandalwood Terrace, Housing Authority public housing units were not allowed to have air conditioning. So all of our units do now have air conditioning. We were allowed to go ahead and put that in right around, I believe it was 2010, 2007, I believe. But they weren't allowed to have dryer hookups. You know, the bathrooms were minimal. So now the design is better and we can do more. But at the time that we built our units and at the time that public housing was in a boom, it was not permitted. The design was very poor. I am missing a page. Hang on.
Angela, when was Sandalwood built again, please?
It was built in the 1980s. I believe it was built 1984. Okay.
Thank you.
Beaufort Housing Authority was formed in 1968 as a city housing authority, as a City of Beaufort Housing Authority. Shortly after that, we expanded to the town of Port Royal, and then we expanded to Hilton Head and built Sandalwood Terrace. Now, the house you see on the right is a single-family, 3-bedroom home, and that is what some of the later public housing is allowed to look like. That is one of our homes in unincorporated Beaufort County that is public housing. So what do we do at the Housing Authority? We do a couple things. We do public housing, which is the Sandalwood Terrace complex. We do the Section 8, which is now known as the Housing Choice Voucher. We have veterans vouchers. We have non-elderly disabled vouchers. They're called mainstream vouchers. And we also run a nonprofit subsidiary called Low Country Housing and Redevelopment, which has a few home units. It has a few units built with South Carolina Trust Fund money. It has a few neighborhood stabilization program units. And of course, it has a few units that are simply owned by the nonprofit. So we do run 3 significant programs out of the Housing Authority, the largest being our Housing Choice Voucher program, the second largest being the public housing program. So public housing, we have 293 units. We are slated to have 295. I'll explain that to you in a minute. The units are owned by Beaufort Housing Authority. It is what is considered a unit-based subsidy, and that means that individuals who live in those units pay 30% of their gross adjusted income toward their rent, and the difference is made up by an operational funding subsidy from HUD. So not a lot of money coming in. Just as a point, the gentleman in the right upper photo, his name was Philip Drummond, and he was the gentleman that had the mule and the cart in the movie The Great Santini, and he ended up living with us, and he was a farmer on St. Helena. And then when he ended up living with us, of course, he didn't pay into Social Security, so he didn't have Social Security. His only form of income was a small stipend from the movie theater, and he was able to live with us. That, I believe, was his 96th birthday. So he was able to live with us for a number of years, and we were able to base his rent just on his income. So certainly interesting, and that was his claim to fame. He liked to talk about that a lot. But as I said, back to public housing. With our public housing, we have what's called the Enterprise Income Verification System that HUD uses in coordination with the IRS and the Social Security Administrations to verify incomes that our individuals and our families have. We have inspections, there's community service, but above all, we have a very long waiting list, not just for public housing, but for our Housing Choice Voucher Program as well. Now, the Faircloth limit was instituted October 1st, 1999, and you might ask, what is that Faircloth limit? Our Faircloth limit is $295. The Faircloth limit was enacted by Congress, and what it says is that the number of public housing units that you have allocated on October 1st, 1999 is the number of public housing units that you will have. You can never have more than that. So the number of public housing units across the United States on October 1st, 1999 is the maximum number of public housing units the country will ever have. Our number is 295. We are down to 293 units because we did have a building that began sinking in Beaufort, and we ended up demolishing that building. With regard to public housing, our average public housing rent is about $524. That's average across all of our 293 units. When our tenants, part of what our tenants do is if their income decreases, they can come in and ask for an interim change in rent at any time. So they may start paying rent at $524, and then for whatever reason they've lost their job, something changed in their family situation, they can come in and go to what we call a zero rent or a negative rent. So our rent ranges throughout our whole public housing program run from about a negative $81 a month all the way up to right around $900, close to $1,000 a month, depending on the income of the family. And when I say a negative $81 a month, what I mean is if we have a family that's not elderly, not working, not disabled, they're not receiving any kind of income, they may actually receive a check from us to assist with their utilities. So we do have a number of families that, not many, but we do have a number of families that receive a monthly check from us to assist with their utilities. I believe it was Councilman Baker that mentioned our leases and the paperwork. Yes, we do have some very strong leases, but most of that is due to federal regulation. For example, HUD enacted a no smoking on public housing properties probably about 4 years ago now, and since that time all of public housing properties have gone non-smoking, both inside and out. So you're not allowed to smoke on federal property. You must walk away 25 feet before you smoke. Additionally, we pay all the water at a lot of our complexes, and we certainly do that at Sandalwood Terrace. So with that being said, we like to keep our costs as low as possible. So we ask that you don't wash cars on property. You can't wash cars on property. But let me just say this real quick. Across the county, we work with Beaufort Jasper Water and Sewer. We work with the Hilton Head Public Service District, and out in our Yemassee complex, we work with Low Country Regional Water. And I can tell you far and above, Hilton Head Public Service District is the best and the easiest to work with. So just keep that in mind. I know you're going through some things with water, but they are truly one of the best to work with, in our opinion, and we work with 3. Okay, with that being said, our leases are very restrictive. We ask that people do not drive and park on our property because in non-designated spaces. And this is because, as you know, some of those water lines are so close to the surface that if you drive a vehicle over them, you break the water line. So yes, you will get a fine for driving over a water line or driving in an area that is not designated as an area for parking. So yes, we do have a pretty intensive lease, but that's necessary due to the regulations that HUD has imposed on us and that we need to therefore impose on our tenants. Okay, so that's a brief overview of public housing. So our Housing Choice Voucher Program, which is formally known as Section 8, we have 611 vouchers allocated to the entire county. This is what we call tenant-based assistance. This is where a tenant can go out into the community, rent an apartment. They pay 30% of their gross adjusted income toward rent, and we pay the remainder. We send we send a check, but we do an automatic deposit into the landlord's bank account on the first of every month. We pay the private landlords, we pay about $333,000 per month into the community. This is a lot of money. One of the interesting things about Section 8 and the $333,000 is that, 10 years ago, a lot of this money used to stay locally because we had a lot of private landlords, a lot of smaller landlords. Now we've moved to much larger landlords because that's what's out there. That's not necessarily our choice. So a large percentage of that $333,000 that we send out every month in Section 8 rental assistance leaves the county immediately. It does not stay. Former Hilton Head Town Mayor David Bennett is a big tax credit landlord locally, and he does run some great properties, and we are very thankful for him and that he participates in this program. As you can imagine, we have very long waiting lists for those 611 vouchers. We opened our waiting list in January of this year. That was the first time we had opened that waiting list since 2017. We opened it for 1 week, and during that 1 week, we took 1,101 applications. 1,101 applications in 1 week for 611 vouchers. Now, our attrition rate, we lose maybe 3 to 5 a month. Through the pandemic, there've been many months that we've lost 0, which is good. So as you can imagine, those waiting lists are just sitting. They're not moving. We'll see what happens as time goes on in the future. The other thing I wanted to mention is that out of those 611 vouchers at any given time, only about 8 or 9 of them are on Hilton Head Island. And that's something that really should be considered, because that is a housing subsidy. It is available, and it would be nice to bring more of those vouchers and that voucher subsidy to Hilton Head to help with those families. To continue, as part of our nonprofit, we do own some homes that are funded through a grant or a loan from the HOME program. and we've built some very nice homes through that. We do have the South Carolina Trust Fund money, which we built some homes. That's one of our trust fund homes. We built that in Mint Farm, and I believe it was Councilman Ames that mentioned density bonuses earlier. The Mint Farm project was an exceptionally good project with density bonuses, and the county, the developers of Mint Farm wanted a density bonus, and the county said to them, all right, well, if you want a density bonus, you must do X number of units affordable. And we received units in Mint Farm, and so did Habitat. And it really worked out wonderfully. Our units, as you can see, well, I didn't give you other units, but you can't tell the difference between our units in Mint Farm and the ones that are privately owned. One of the things to really consider and to be aware of when working with density bonuses is that the bonus should, in order to make it work, the bonus should correlate to the program. So if you're going to offer a 50% density, if they do affordable, at least, the proportional number of the density and the units that are going to be affordable should really correlate. Making somebody get a 50% density bonus and only 5% affordable doesn't really increase your affordable housing stock. We also have units in the Neighborhood Stabilization Program. This was another grant that came out of President Obama's administration. We purchased 12 homes in Bluffton and 1 home in Beaufort. As you can see, they're located through different subdivisions in Bluffton, including, Pine Ridge, Pine Forest, University Park. And every one of those units rent for $700 a month. These are beautiful 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes. They're all fairly new. They were built in the mid-2000s, and they're just nice units, and we're happy to be able to offer them. So that's the 3 programs that we run: the Housing Choice Voucher Program, the Public Housing Program, and then, of course, our nonprofit that runs a lot of the other little programs. What we are not a solution for homelessness. We have very long waiting lists. We have pretty stringent application criteria, and the only exception would be our veterans vouchers. If you know of a veteran in need of housing, homeless, nearly homeless, we can help them immediately. We have received some vouchers through HUD and the Department of Veterans Affairs. We have a veterans counselor that comes out of Savannah, out of the VA in Savannah. He's here 1 day a week, and we will work to house our veterans immediately, as quickly as we can. That's not always as easy as it seems, but the housing option is there for them. Again, there are income restrictions, just as with every program that we run. And with the veterans, they cannot have a dishonorable discharge. They can have anything else, but they cannot have a dishonorable discharge. What we offer safe housing, decent housing, sanitary housing, and resident education. And I know what you're thinking, well, we got to talk about Hilton Head, and we will certainly get there. When we talk about resident education, we offer financial education and family self-sufficiency programs for our residents. Now, the financial education, do we do that? Do we go in and sit down with them and go over their budget with them? Sometimes, but mostly we'll contract with an agency such as Consumer Credit Counseling out of Savannah to come in and provide some credit counseling, some budgeting, because on top of all of this, we offer a homeownership program. It is an excellent program, whereas just as we help a tenant pay rent, we will help them pay a mortgage for a specified number of years. And we really want both our public housing and our housing choice voucher programs to be a stepping stone to help people use the affordable housing system to get what they need, become self-sufficient, and then move into the community to become a homeowner or a renter in a market rate unit that they can afford. Now, as you know, we do not pay property taxes. We do, however, certainly pay a payment in lieu of taxes to the county and the municipalities. So it's not, I don't want you to think, oh, we do all this and we don't have to pay anything. We don't pay property taxes, but we do pay a payment in lieu of taxes. I just wanted you to know. Where do we go from here? Well, one of the things we need to think of as we move forward is the NIMBY, not in my backyard. There are a lot of NIMBY issues that we could address if we decided to do something different, and I'm sure that when or if we decide to do something else, and as affordable housing moves forward, you know, that will be something that is addressed. And there's a lot that has to go with subsidized versus regulation. When you talk about subsidized housing, there are a lot of regulations with subsidized housing. So now specifically for Sandalwood, I believe it was Councilwoman Baker that asked, there are 80 units at Sandalwood Terrace. One is used as a community center, so that takes us down to 79. We have an on-site Head Start program. We have 21 bedroom units, 22 bedroom units, 32 3-bedroom units, and 7 4-bedroom units. Now remember, we took the one out that we're using as a community center. The other thing that I wanted to tell you is when we have a lot of individuals, a lot of elderly and disabled, that we don't have enough 1-bedroom units. So there are a few of those 2-bedroom units that we may only have one person in. So the average rent at Sandalwood Terrace is $312 per month, and that is a little bit lower than the rest of our community, the public housing community. So just you know, it is what it is. We average it out across the whole county. At Sandalwood Terrace, 26% of those 79 units are elderly, 13 are disabled, 13%, 39% are working, 5% receive TANF, which is the temporary aid to needy families that that comes through DSS. Now, that leaves about 17%, and those are the ones with no discernible income source. So when I say 26% are elderly as determined by their receiving a Social Security check. 13% are disabled as determined by their receiving a disability check. And again, 39% are working as per their pay stubs, and 5% are receiving TANF, and the rest are individuals with no discernible income source. Those would be the individuals that we would send the utility check to each month. At Sandalwood Terrace, we have 207 total people and 116 children. Okay. And that concludes my slideshow. I'm trying to get to the rest of my information. I did want to tell you where we've been since the article in the paper. The article in the paper addresses 5, maybe 6 units. We attempted to meet with those tenants. We met with 3 of those tenants and discussed all of their concerns. 2 refused to meet with us, and 1 is in jail, has been in jail since September. So not sure what's going on there, but we're trying to figure that out. The 3 we met with, we have received a list of their concerns. We certainly will begin to make those repairs. Actually, we attempted to begin those repairs on Friday, and we were refused entry. We will try again tomorrow, and we will begin to make those repairs, and these units will be repaired to a safe, decent, and sanitary condition. So you might say, how did this happen? Well, normally we would go in to every unit every month and change a filter, change the HVAC filter. That's what we do. We did not do that this year. Normally, we would treat for roaches and pest control quarterly. We treated quarterly as intended. However, when we have issues such as infestations or poor housekeeping, we may treat more often, such as monthly or every 2 weeks. And when we put a tenant on a 2-week roach or pest control treatment, and we go back every 2 weeks and treat them, then it's usually we get it under control, and then we may move back to monthly and then back to quarterly. Again, those types of treatments did not happen this year. They are starting to happen again, but they did not happen this year. But as I said, things are starting to normalize, and we will be making those repairs. Let's see. Someone mentioned lead or asbestos. Again, these units were built in the 80s, so there is no lead. And bed bugs. We treat for bed bugs when we are notified that they have bed bugs. Part of the HUD protocol for bed bugs is that we check the units on either side of the affected unit, and if either of those units have bed bugs, we treat for them as well. And if they don't, then we only treat the affected unit. So it's pretty comprehensive when we treat for either roaches or bed bugs. We have been under termite contracts since the complex was built, and it is inspected annually for termites. So I think we will be there. As I said, we're going to make the repairs. We are going to make Sandalwood Terrace completely safe and sanitary for all of its tenants. I can tell you that sometimes when we go in the units, they don't look like when you might see them. They look just a little different. But nonetheless, we're working through everything that we can, and I can tell you that those units will be completely where they need to be very shortly. And Mr. Chairman, that's all I have. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, Angela, thank you for that thorough overview. Much appreciated. I'd like to now turn to our committee members, and beginning on the far left with Mr. Lennox, please.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Angela. That was a lot more than I expected to get in terms of how the programs work and how many they serve. I think, let me simply summarize what I think the two issues are. One is supply of affordable housing, and that's not something that we're charged with dealing with through this committee today. The second issue, I think, is probably one that we can address more appropriately, and that is sustainability and quality of life in these units. Angela, you talked about your lease being onerous, and I agree. It is almost intimidating. But there is a section of the lease that I think has application to today's discussion, and that is on page 7, paragraph 9. Management agrees, and then it it enumerates about 8 or 10 responsibilities that the management has, such as to maintain premises, to comply with the building codes, to make necessary repairs, to keep the project building facilities and common areas in good condition, to maintain in good and safe working order and conditions all electrical, plumbing, sanitary, and heating, much of what you really described. And then it goes on in paragraph 10 to talk about the responsibilities of the resident. And I think those two paragraphs really are germane to the issue of sustainability and quality of life. I'm disappointed that some of the tenants refuse you access to the units in an effort to try to make the necessary repairs, but I'm sure that you'll be successful in trying to get it done if you are persistent. The only question I would have, Angela, is ongoing. On average, how many requests for repairs do you have at Sandalwood?
So at Sandalwood, we probably receive 2 to 3 work orders a day. Some of them very minor, like a toilet's overflowing or a toilet seat is cracked, or someone doesn't know how to their thermostat isn't working correctly, or they don't know how to work it correctly. So 2 to 3 a day, and everything from the minor ones to the major ones. There's a hole in the wall, the shower's coming off the wall. So it could be any myriad of things that are going on.
These examples that the island packet alluded to, were these examples of necessary repairs where there was no request or requisition made of you?
So most of the cases it was not. Most of the cases we were not aware of. Some we were, and we were doing what we needed to do to work within our guidelines, yes. But, I can tell you that there have been times when we would get a work order call in and we'd go to make a repair, and someone in the unit would get COVID or have been tested, and we couldn't go in for 15 days. So some we were not aware of, and some we were, yes.
Okay, thank you, Angela, and thank you, Bill.
Thank you. Moving now to David Ames, please.
Thank you. Angela, appreciate your taking time to educate us. Good information. It seems to me that there are 4 areas that are challenging this project and perhaps projects across the country. The first is the Fed regs. Do you have any flexibility in drafting your own leases, or are they prescribed word for word by the federal government?
So we have some flexibility, but there are parts of that are prescribed word for word.
When was the last time that your contracts were reviewed by attorneys?
We added, I believe, the no smoking lease addendum in, I think it was 2017 or 2018, so it would have been at that time.
But you said that was required by HUD, is that correct?
It was, that's correct.
Okay. So again, you were having to respond to a federal regulation in that regard.
That is correct.
Okay. So I think that we have to recognize that the federal government is playing a significant role in how this is maintained and operated, but there is some room for flexibility in the contracts and how they get interpreted by your board. Secondly, limited dollars. You gave some statistics that are eye-opening. I I think that it goes without saying that with limited dollars, there's going to be over time a maintenance issue externally and internally. So I think that that's something that we as a town, as a county, as a state need to think about. But my question, Angela, is part of that problem that you don't have the necessary personnel on your staff to deal with these issues in advance of their being reported?
So, do we have an open position in maintenance? Yes, we do. But were we in each unit as we needed to be throughout the year, we would most likely have addressed these issues before they came to this point. Part of it is that we weren't in the units as we should have been. So a great question and not so easy to answer.
Okay. You mentioned that the early design didn't require HVAC systems and it didn't require vents for dryers. What are there, through the wall or through the window HVAC system at this point? Is that how units are being cooled or heated?
So, no, actually, that's a great question. I believe it was around 2006, 2007, we were permitted to install central HVAC systems, and we did. We installed those in all of our public housing units. The hard part is taking those older buildings and retrofitting them for the HVAC system, which wasn't as easy as you might imagine.
But today they are operating efficiently and filters are being taken care of, and so one could assume that the mold that has been reported is not due to a malfunctioning HVAC system?
That is correct. We actually have a mold report that shows that there is just common allergens in the unit. There is no mold from water intrusion or from the HVAC system.
Okay, and do the dryer systems now, are they vented?
No, Sandalwood still is not equipped with dryer vents, so dryers are not allowed in the individual units.
Okay. But are washing machines?
Yes, they are.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, that answers my question regarding limited dollars and maintenance personnel. Age of buildings, clearly, we are dealing with a stock of units that were built in the early 80s. And I remember how we were building buildings back then, slab on grade, basic 2x4 construction. Those buildings are old, tired, and if they haven't been getting sort of regular maintenance, exterior and interior, my conclusion would be that they're outliving their useful life. And so that to me is a very significant challenge for us as a community, how we respond to a situation that is probably deteriorating, and I'm not positive that maintenance is really more than a Band-Aid at this point. So I think that it begs a discussion on design and future solutions that are beyond pure maintenance. The last one
Councilman Ames, may I?
Yeah, please.
So I wasn't going to bring this up this morning, but last fall, HUD has offered a program that they have never offered before, and it's what HUD is calling the repositioning of public housing. And what they're allowing us to do is to remove some of those units from the public housing inventory and change funding sources basically, but our long-term plan with Sandalwood, now it's a really long-term plan because, you know, the government it works to the best of its ability and it does a great job, but things don't move as quickly as we would like to see them move. So our long-term plan is when we get to the point where we can make an application to HUD to reposition Sandalwood Terrace, to bring it out of the public housing inventory and rebuild with completely new and modern units. But it's not as easy as that, and it doesn't happen as quickly as that, because as you can imagine, we have 78 families there right now that we can't displace them. We're not going to put them on the street. We're not going to do all those things. So, but that's not even the beginning. Go ahead.
Well, I think that is a door that is beginning to open for us to consider. And I'm aware that the state has tax credit money, both at 4%, the federal government at 9%. There's even a special housing a loan program at the state level. It seems to me that a very important conversation we ought to be having now is how do we take advantage of those programs and upgrade the housing that is provided on the island. And yes, we would have the issue of relocation to challenge or to deal with, but that is a 18-month challenge that we end up being in a far better place in 18 months. So it seems to me that is something that this town, this county ought to be thinking about. The last item, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say it is, but our first step is we have to, it's a multi-step process, but we would have to make an application with HUD or to HUD to be able to remove those units from the public housing inventory before we could do that. And we are not at the point where we can do that yet.
Well, I would suggest that, respectfully suggest that your board think about what it would take to move that forward.
Oh, they are. So
okay.
Just to give you a little more, the part of the process is before you can remove something as large as Sandalwood Terrace from the public housing inventory, you must have less than 250 total public housing units. We are at 293, as I told you earlier. Okay. So our first application has to be to remove other units to get us below the 250 mark, and then we can, so it's not as easy as, that's why I didn't want to bring it.
I understand.
Yeah. But my board is very progressive, and they are working toward that.
I'm just thinking that the end game is to do more than paint and patch.
Yes, it is.
That's a necessary immediate step.
Sure,
all right,
and it certainly is.
The last part of this is the Beaufort Housing Authority itself, the town of Hilton, the county, and the state. How do we come together to leverage our capabilities to make a difference for the people who live in Sandalwood?
Well, Councilman, that is a very good question. And I think meetings like this where we can understand each other and what is expected is certainly a first step. When we go to HUD to ask them to remove Sandalwood from the public housing inventory, we will need a letter from the town supporting that move. And so that would be the next step. Then when we talk about relocation and helping to move those residents, that is something that the town could certainly assist with as well, because we would need, we'll need some private landlords that would be willing to accept the housing choice voucher for those individuals so that we could help move them out more quickly. So there are certainly ways, and I'm sure I'll think of 5 more as soon as we get off this call.
Well, let me make one final comment. The 79 families that live in Sandalwood should not take from this conversation that they are going to be removed from the HUD program. That's not my intention at all. My direction is to give them better housing. And I don't know what the intermediate steps are, but my goal is to provide them better housing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. Tammy Becker, please.
So, hi. There's been an awful lot of information shared and interesting conversation. I just want to go through a few things for my benefit. First, can you please describe the organization structure? The board, the executive director, you have a board. Who appoints your board of directors?
So the board is appointed by the different municipalities, either the town of Hilton Head, the town of Port Royal, the city of Beaufort, and the county at large.
And what are their terms?
They are 5-year terms.
And when you say the municipality, where would that direction come from in terms of our representatives to the board, and how many do we have?
Hilton Head has one. I believe he is in his 2nd year.
And his appointment would have come from where?
It comes from the town, and it's ratified by the city of Beaufort.
So it's as a recommendation through town. Okay. In terms of, I believe you were asked about, you follow primarily HUD's guidance and the lease that's provided through HUD with some opportunities, some limited opportunities there. Are those the only policies, or do you also have an opportunity to create policies that are specific to the location that your buildings are in?
So we do have some operational policies, and we have some leeway within HUD's parameters. So HUD might say you can do this or you can do that. For example, with our waiting lists for public housing, they say you can have an overall waiting list for the whole county, for your whole service area, or you can have site-specific waiting lists. And I know that was the first example that popped in my head. So they give us the policy, and they may give us a choice or two within that policy.
So as part of those policies that are directed by HUD, policies with regard to work orders, policies with regard to inspections, both exterior inspections and interior inspections, are those policies directed by HUD? Are the grievance procedures policies directed by HUD, or are those more locally created?
Okay, so the grievance procedure policy is directed by HUD, and there is no room for variance in it. The inspection policy has a couple things that are mandatory. For example, we must inspect each unit at least once every year. However, that policy was waived due to COVID. So, and now it's starting back, well, I believe it's waived through December 31st, but nonetheless, with that being said, we have the opportunity to inspect more often. So with all of our tenants, for example, we do a move-in inspection, then we do a 60-day inspection just to make sure after they've been there 60 days that everything is going the way it's supposed to be. And then we do our annual inspections. And then we would, if pest control went into a unit and they noticed roach activity or poor housekeeping or other issues based on their treatment, or their other inspections can be triggered, but we're required by HUD to do at least one every 12 months.
And so just staying on inspections for a moment, I'm assuming that part of the inspection process is the exterior of the buildings as well.
That is correct.
And so when maintenance issues on the exterior of the buildings are identified, what is the timeline in terms of those being contracted or whatever maintenance crew is scheduled to make those repairs on the outside that wouldn't require any of the difficulties with regard to COVID, et cetera?
Okay, so, and that's a good question, and it would depend on the issue itself. Do we have the parts that we need in stock? Do we have to, what can we do it ourselves? Do we have to contract it out? So it would really depend on the issue. If it's something that we can do in-house, we certainly try to get there within the week, 7 days max.
So you mentioned you have a maintenance crew, but you have one opening currently. How many do you have on staff?
6.
And that's without one being filled, or is there 7 in total?
7 in total, and there's 6 on staff right now.
All right. And so when the pest control come, they do the interior treatments. Do they also treat outside the buildings?
For termites, we have a different company.
For pests, for palmetto bugs, pests, that sort of thing.
No, we would do that in-house. We have licensed pest control applicators on staff.
And do they regularly, on a monthly basis, treat the buildings, quarterly? How often does your in-staff
treat them?
I'm
sorry.
So you have an in-staff maintenance crew that that's licensed to do pest control, and they do the exterior of the buildings. My question is, how often do they do the exterior of the buildings? What is that schedule?
Oh, so we do that quarterly with the interior, but we also do it as needed. If it's ant hills or something that are popping up, we'll take care of them as we see them. If we have squirrels that try to get in, and they do, squirrels will try to chew in through a soffit or a fascia. We will take care of those as needed.
And so during this time when you were having struggles getting into the units due to COVID, I'm assuming, was there a step up in terms of it minimally treating the exterior of the buildings to provide some sort of protection?
So at times, yes. At times, some of our staff was out with COVID, and we were making adjustments throughout our whole organization. So there were times that we had more time to do things, rake leaves, pick up sticks, treat the outsides, move the leaves away from the exterior of the buildings, etc. And then there were times when no, we just had enough time and enough staff to deal with the call-in work orders. Right.
So I think there's probably some concerns with that. So a work order is called in, an inspection is made, a maintenance is taken care of as promptly as possible, and there, from y'all's report, are no issues with regard to mold and lead and those items. And I have quite a few questions with regard to that, having had the opportunity to walk through a couple of the units myself. And I will just say without hesitation that, well, let me back up a second. When someone moves in to one of your units, I assume there's a check-in list. Someone goes in, shows them around the apartment or a unit, and teaches them how to use the thermostat, etc. I see that in your documentation. Is there also a sign-off that at that point everything is in working order?
So not necessarily. If they find something during the move-in that is not, then we will go out and fix it within a few days. And that's pretty common. It could be anything from an outlet not working to a light bulb out or so, yeah. Just because they're doing a move-in inspection doesn't necessarily mean everything is perfect. It means that whatever we find, we'll go right back out and take care of it.
So I'm trying to stay without jumping around very much. So that is documented in that way. Okay. So if there is an issue in the unit that needs to be addressed, and from my observations, some issues that could not possibly have happened, and that's my opinion, in a short period of time. That I get stuck there. Because, you know, we've talked about mold issues, we've talked about water intrusion issues, and I can say with certainty from my own eyes that there are issues where there is not a safe habitat, never mind for a healthy adult, but for children. And so I become very concerned about that. If there was a work order that was placed for some of these conditions that I've witnessed, and they were promptly taken care of, I wouldn't have seen them. And so I'm worried about the actual response rate on the ground. And I'm going to follow that up with your statistics here that there were 5 or 6 units with concerns, 3 tenants that y'all were trying to get in and get things done with, and 2 who refuse, and one last who's having some personal difficulties that I guess wasn't available. With all of the restrictions that we've talked about and you've acknowledged within the lease, you don't have the authority to go in to make repairs. And if we're denied, is there a policy, is there a document and a paper that you would say to the tenant, look, we've come in, we have acknowledged that you're having an issue, and you are refusing our assistance to get it done, that they sign off on? What does that look like?
All right, so as I said, we met with 3 of the affected tenants. Then Friday, we attempted to go in because the worst unit that was out there, we were not aware of most of those issues in that unit. And we attempted to go in on Friday and treat the mold and on the wall, the moisture on the wall, and treat the water heater, etc. And the tenant refused us entry. Now, what we said to her was, listen, we just spoke with you about it. According to our lease, it's considered the generation of a work order. We want to come in and repair. And she said, no, not today. We said, okay. So then what we did Friday is we gave them official notice that we will be back tomorrow to go in and begin making those repairs. And that's completely what we plan to do. Now, if they refuse us tomorrow, we will send them a lease violation notice and make another appointment. And just as you said, tell them we are attempting to correct these maintenance issues and we need access to the unit. Now, if that doesn't happen, our alternative would be to go to magistrate court to enforce the lease.
So is there any other procedure available that isn't quite as draconian, something that's not quite as, I mean, obviously these are folks who are looking to you for assistance. Is there a different conversation? Is there a mediator? What type of programming is there available to intervene rather than just send it off to the courts?
So I would hope that Tuesday that they will understand tomorrow that the residents are in need of these repairs, will understand that we need to come in and make them. If there is a different plan, I don't know what it could be, because they can tell you, oh yes, we'll let them come in and make these repairs. They can tell a mediator, oh yes, we'll let them come in and make these repairs. But unless you're standing there when maintenance or our contractor tries to go in to make these repairs, they can say no.
Some of the conditions I saw, I can't imagine someone saying no. I'll leave it.
I couldn't imagine it either, but I can tell you they did on Friday, and we have it on video.
Okay. All right. I've beat that one as far as at this time. I think it's appropriate too, and so I'm going to move on from that. When I was reading your grievance procedures, and the reason I keep going back to the grievance procedures is because it would seem to me that if the work orders are being, the concerns are being brought to the attention of the property manager, and those concerns are being investigated, work orders are being created, and a timely work schedule is being developed, then when that doesn't happen, if someone was to want to take a step to make the grievance, there are many things in the lease that I find difficult. But one of the things that, if you could just describe to me, it's my understanding that when the committee or a person isn't available, you become the grievance, the person who hears the grievances. Is that correct? Did I get that right?
Well, so yes, but that normally doesn't happen. We have other individuals. We have 3 set individuals that can hear the grievance. So it's unlikely that I would ever hear a grievance. It's unlikely that.
Who are those 3? Who are those people? Like,
so one is our housing choice voucher administrator. Another is a retired legal aid attorney, and a third is a member of the community development team from the Beaufort Jasper EOC.
So if someone is having trouble, if someone is having trouble, and the first work order comes in, and the proper maintenance crew is there to try to remediate or to solve the problem, and it doesn't happen the first time, is there a quick response that occurs? Is it become outside of the realm of a normal concern and not elevated to an after hours type of concern, which would then trigger fines and fees being assessed? What happens? What's the follow-up? If a mold concern, let's say it's a mold concern, what's the follow-up? Mold is not an easy thing to get rid of. Mold can be throughout the system, correct? It can be in the walls. It can be on the backs of the dry board, on the 2x4s or whatever the materials are that the buildings are constructed with. That's one instance. If there's a ceiling that perhaps is holding water or has come loose from the rafters and looks as though it's about to fall, where does that fall into the work order in terms of being elevated to a serious conditions that needs immediate attention?
I can tell you that we have had those issues, not just at Sandalwood. We've had them all over the housing authority throughout the years. And when that happens, we get in there immediately as soon as we are told about it. But you know what? I wasn't going to say this, but I am. There are times when we go in these units and we find things, because we go in for emergencies, that tenants don't want us to see. And therefore, they try to keep us out of these units for a number of reasons. And I'm not saying that's what's happening in this instance, but if there is an emergency and it is as severe as that, we will get in there to take care of it. Just like we tried to go in Friday and take care of issues and were denied.
Okay, I'm gonna have two more questions. I'm gonna turn this over to someone else. I believe, I'll reserve again my right to be able to follow up. But in terms of getting in there to address the issues that exist, if that's one thing, but there are also random inspections as you've described them. And when you fail a random inspection for whatever the case may be, what is the procedure, what is the protocol for someone who has been issued a failure, an inspection failure? What happens next?
Well, and that's a very good question. So it depends on what the failure is for. If the failure is something on the housing authority that we have to take care of, we go back in and take care of it within 7 days. Now, if it's severe, we certainly try to do it more quickly than that. If it is not, it can take up to 7 days. If it is a tenant housekeeping issue, a blocked egress issue, or anything like that, they have 14 days before we go back.
And is there any protocol, is there any requirement on the party who's failed inspection to attend any class, pay any fine, do any sort of educational programs that are available?
So not at that point. So after the first failed inspection, maybe it's for housekeeping or, not cleaning up after a service animal, or at that point, we just tell them we're coming back in 14 days and we hope that you'll have the list of items repaired or cleaned or whatever it is. If we go back in those 14 days and it is still not to the point that we need it to be, then we require them to come in and watch a housekeeping video that really tells them what we expect of them and what we would like to see with regard to housekeeping in their unit. And at that point, we will inspect 14 days after they watch the video, and hopefully it is at the point where everybody is happy at that time. If not, we'll send them usually a 30-day notice to terminate. At that point, they could request a grievance hearing, and the hearing officer, this happened one time in the past, the hearing officer, maybe it was more than once, but the hearing officer put them on inspections, once a month inspections for housekeeping until it came up to the point where it needed to be, and then we were fine and we let go of the inspections.
Okay, so two follow-ups. Where are those videos shown? Are they shown right there at the manager's office on site, or is there a facility that one goes to? Is it on is it YouTube that you can log on with your computer to watch?
So normally we'll show them in the community center. They'll meet with our resident coordinator in the community center right there on site. They'll watch the video, and then the community and the resident coordinator will assist them, maybe answer any questions be willing to walk over to their apartment with them and say, do you have any questions? Is there anything we can help you with that you don't understand? And really one-on-one walk them through what they need to do to pass the inspection.
Right, and so that's your part and how you help them.
Hold on, there's a jet going over. Hang on.
Okay, I'm gonna run out of battery. I'm gonna try to move quickly. When y'all are doing those inspections, I think probably you would find mold or something like that. And I assume that you have I'm not sure who regulates that type of cleanup and treatment and remediation of those sorts of things. But I'm assuming you're using the highest quality, most up-to-date remedies for those sorts of incidents with regard to molds, something like that.
Absolutely. One of the first things that we do is we have to try to determine a source so that we can make sure it doesn't reoccur. We don't want to just treat it and leave it alone. We want to find the source, make the repair, then treat it so that it doesn't reoccur. So yes, absolutely.
When were the roofs replaced on the building?
I do not know off the top of my head.
I can follow up on that. I'm gonna let this go. I do have follow-up questions. I appreciate your time and your straightforward answers. Number 4 of your lease agreement talks about security deposits. I would like to, in a follow-up conversation, get some additional details on those security deposits in terms of statistics. How often, when a tenant might vacate the unit, that they are given their security deposit back, how much. I understand there are a number of ways in which that security deposit gets eaten up. It seems to me, and if I read it correctly, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that the maximum amount of a security deposit is $1,200. And so in these situations, that seems to be an awful lot of money sitting in a reserve account, I assume, that could be helping to manage on an ongoing basis some of these issues. And I'm going to thank you and everyone for their patience as I've asked these questions. I'll follow up with others, but I do want to say I am hopeful, and I'd like to hear more when it happens, that some of these more publicized and grotesque units are immediately addressed. There's a bathroom where you mentioned it yourself. A fiberglass insert is part of the bathroom assembly, which has dislodged itself from the wall easily 1.5 inches, 2 inches. And it's not the first time, because you can see how it's been patched and repaired before. Sadly enough, behind that fiberglass piece, there is undoubtedly a wall of mold that follows its path around and through that bathroom and through the air circulation systems. There are children living in these units. There's a gap somewhere, and I'm not sure how we help to address it, but I'm all in on that. And so, again, thank you, and I really would like to hear how the units that you've got your eye on currently are addressed in this coming week. Thank you.
Hey, Bill?
Yes, David?
I just had two other things I wanted to say. Angela,
Sure.
A simple question. Who owns the furniture in the units?
The tenant.
Okay. So that may be an opportunity where the broader community can assist, and you don't have to respond. Just a light bulb went off in my head there. What sounds like a fairly fundamental issue that is confronting this is trust between the tenant and the Beaufort Housing Trust. I don't know if it's a communication issue. I don't know if it's a bureaucratic issue. Out of curiosity, are there members of your on your board who are Latino or African American?
So each community has a resident council, and that resident council usually meets monthly. That is members of the community, and it does meet on Hilton Head monthly. Now, we did not meet all year, but we did meet in October. So now our board, no, there are no Latin American members of our board. However, our percentage at Sandalwood of Hispanic is very low, actually.
Well, that really is almost immaterial vis-a-vis Sandalwood, except that I think that to solve trust issues, communication is necessary, empathy and sensitivity to the plights of the customer. And so I'm just suggesting to you and your board maybe to look into the advisability of finding Latino and African American board members. So enough said.
Oh, no,
on that.
I'm
Thank
sorry. We do have 2 African American board members. I didn't hear that part. I thought you only said Latino. I'm sorry.
All right. I just look into the trust communication issue. Thank you.
Sure. No, I agree. Yes.
Okay, thank you. In the interest of time, I'll try to wrap this up. And while I'm discussing a few points, I'll be asking each of the committee members in one sentence or two, where do we go from here? Angela, in terms of the interface with our town inspectors, what takes place there? If someone has a fire hazard, do they call our building department? Do they call you? What is the interface, if any, with our building inspector people?
So I believe it was the fire marshal, or maybe it was, I can't remember who exactly it was, but they met with our maintenance staff. They suggested that maintenance go through every unit and check the smoke detectors to make sure they weren't outdated, because they were operational, but there were, I think they found a few that were outdated, and there are multiple smoke detectors in most of the units. So, and they said, at the same time, it'd be a really good idea to make sure every window is operational. And we said, you know what, that's a great idea. And we did that. So anytime things come up, we're quite willing to listen to suggestions from the codes enforcement or whomever might provide them. And if it's something that we can do, we'll certainly do that.
Now, do they inspect Sandalwood on an ongoing basis, or is it ad hoc based on a particular request?
They do not. It is my understanding that they inspect when requested by a resident.
So this is Johaida, the fire marshal. I
yes.
can answer that question for you.
Thank you.
There are some common areas that we inspect on an annual basis, like the Head Start area and some of the other common places, but we don't go inside of the units because they are lived-in units, and we don't go in. We did receive multiple complaints that when they invite us in, we will certainly go into their unit and address what their questions or concerns are. And then, yes, we did meet with the maintenance person that's on site and went over those things with them.
Thank you, Johaida. Angela, you made mention that the AC system is a central system, and recognizing the fact that most AC systems that are in the market today that are in operation are not designed to deal with infectious disease. Are there any plans to evaluate your existing system to see what you could do to upgrade?
Yes, actually, there are certainly plans to, we do an energy audit and an energy efficiency audit every 5 years to make sure that we are in compliance. So now it doesn't address infectious disease. However, we do have a capital fund program where we plan to replace units as needed. Not as needed, on a regularly scheduled basis.
I just bring that up in the using the nursing home industry as an example. There are efforts underway throughout the country to upgrade central systems so they can deal with a COVID situation. And I would respectfully suggest that that's somewhat analogous to your situation, and that you look into that.
Okay.
It seems to me, and this was a point made by one of our colleagues earlier, that you're dealing with a insurmountable problem here, dealing with a facility with a high degree of wear and tear in a facility that probably has exceeded its realistic lifespan. So given that you brought up the idea of repositioning of public housing and the difficulty, frankly, from a bureaucratic standpoint, going through that process, is that an issue or an opportunity where you would welcome support from the town in our coalition here in Beaufort County, and working with people at the state and federal level to see if we could move a little faster to deal with this situation of a tired facility?
Oh, absolutely. And part of the HUD application, when we get to that point, requires a letter of support from the town.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. All right, I want to thank you for coming and addressing to the best of your ability all the questions that we've asked. That's much appreciated. And I'm heartened by your interest in corrective action. You already initiated that, and going forward, I would expect that to continue. Just speaking among ourselves as colleagues on this committee, thoughts about what we should do going forward. I'll begin with Mr. Lennox, please.
Bill, I think Angela has started the process of remediation, which is really what has to happen. I agree with David. These things have probably lived beyond their useful life. And the plain cold truth is remediation is going to be immediately needed. If I were sitting in Angela's seat, I'd go back to make sure that I had the paragraph 9 management responsibilities covered very well, and there was some sort of a routine that would allow me to uncover some of these before they become so serious that they can't be fixed. I think we need to talk more among ourselves.
Yes, fine. Thank you for that insight. And my worry, to tag along to Mr. Lennox's comment as a comment to Angela's, I just wonder whether your maintenance budget is sufficient enough to maintain an old and tired facility. But that's something to talk about later. David, going forward, your thoughts, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. I think Intergovernmental should prepare a summary so that the full council can hear what our thoughts are. I would include in that, because I know that staff has been a part of this conversation, I'd ask staff for its comments and any proposals that it might see, and I'm really talking here about near-term proposals. Mm-hmm. I would hope that the Beaufort Housing Authority Board would provide us the same comments and proposals for near-term solutions. And then I might even go to the Community Foundation of the Low Country and ask whether or not a consortium of nonprofits could in some way come together and address some of these issues. I don't know how to categorize the issues in any other way than those things that beg the attention of the broader community. So I think those are the 4 items that I would suggest that we think about.
Okay. Well, thank you. I share the thoughts and the directions that I've heard. Tammy, I didn't mean to leave you out. You're not a committee member, but you're welcome to give a 1 sentence going forward.
Sure. I think my 1 sentence is that I agree wholeheartedly from my observations. And my opinion is that these buildings are likely exceeded their useful life. I'd like to hear what the schedule of work and maintenance and the number of items that we heard about going forward that are in the works. And I'd also like to know more about if there's an advocate, someone between the housing authority and the tenant, someone who can relieve maybe some of the anxieties that the tenants may have and communicate in a positive, solution-oriented way with the housing authority. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for the contributory comment. These thoughts will be summarized in terms of the minutes of this meeting. We would ask staff to critique to make sure nothing's been missed and share this with town council, our colleagues, for further consideration. I want to publicly acknowledge Angela's participation in leadership and very forthright discussion of what the situation is here, and we thank you for that. Is there a motion for adjournment?
Excuse me, Mr. Harkins?
Yes.
You didn't address item 5A, the approval of the minutes from the special meeting on June 24th.
Thank you, Phyllis. We have the minutes mentioned by Phyllis. Is there a motion for their approval?
Move to approve the June 24th minutes of the committee.
I second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved. Thank you. Now, is there a motion for adjournment?
I would make the motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All in favor? We stand adjourned. Thank you very much.